The Holy Gospel according to Luke, the 16th chapter.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Then Jesus said to the disciples, "There was a rich man who had a manager, and charges were brought to him that this man was squandering his property. So he summoned him and said to him, 'What is this that I hear about you? Give me an accounting of your management, because you cannot be my manager any longer.' Then the manager said to himself, 'What will I do now that my master is taking the position away from me? I am not strong enough to dig, and I am ashamed to beg. I have decided what to do, so that when I am dismissed as manager, people may welcome me into their homes.' So summoning his master's debtors one by one, he asked the first, 'How much do you owe my master?' He answered, 100 jugs of olive oil.' The manager said to him, 'Take your bill, sit down quickly, and make it 50. Then the manager asked another, 'And how much do you owe?' He replied, 100 containers of wheat. He said to him, 'Take your bill and make it 80. And his master commended the dishonest manager because he had acted shrewdly. For the children of this age are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than are the children of light. And I tell you, make friends for yourselves by means of dishonest wealth, so that when it is gone, they may welcome you into the eternal homes. Whoever is faithful in a very little is faithful also in much, and whoever is dishonest in a very little is dishonest also in much. If then you have not been faithful with the dishonest wealth, who will entrust you to the true riches? And if you have not been faithful with what belongs to another, who will give you what is your own? No slave can serve two masters, for a slave will either hate the one and love the other, or be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and wealth." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
How many retirees does it take to change a light bulb? Just one, but they can't do anything about it until after the pickleball game. How many senior citizens does it take to change a light bulb? What was the question? Oh. Sorry. Maybe. On this Senior Sunday, on this day where we recognize, honor, and give thanks for everyone in our congregation who has done so much and given so much time and brought so much experience among us, we can pick on them a little bit, right? I always think of it too late, but this feels like a good Sunday where I could just keep my trap shut and let our honorees have the microphone, you think? There's probably much that can be said or offered by those who have more life experience. That's nicer than calling them old, I think. I wonder if we did that, what kind of advice you would offer. I wonder if it would have anything to do with relationships, healthy living, faith, joy and laughter, kindness, or money. I don't know, I've always heard that money is a taboo topic for conversation. I've been told not to talk about it in the church. It's a private matter. It's between me and me alone, or maybe me and God, or maybe me and my family, but certainly never in public. And yet, how often does Jesus talk about money and wealth during his public ministry? So we get it this morning as well. After a long parable about a rich man and his dishonest manager, Jesus concludes by saying, "No slave can serve two masters, for a slave will either hate the one and love the other, or be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and wealth." I wonder if any of the advice that we would get from those with more life experience would have anything to do with that. You cannot serve God and wealth. Money is not the final means to an end. God turns everything we understand and believe about money completely upside down. Right? So that was the parable we heard. There was a rich man who had a manager, and charges were brought to the rich man that this manager was squandering his property. So the rich man summoned the manager. He said to him, "What do I hear about you? Give me an accounting of your management, because you can no longer be my manager." So at this point, after hearing this parable, I'm sure that all of us, and probably all of Jesus' listeners, after being confounded by parable after parable, we're probably thinking, "Oh, okay, this is an easy one." Right? Okay, don't be dishonest. Don't cheat someone else. Be upright. Oh, do unto others as you would have them do to you. Oh, we're getting the hang of this, right, Jesus? Right? But then, as we heard in the gospel story, Jesus goes on after this parable to, well, honestly, it feels like he goes off the deep end with this teaching. The manager continues to seemingly swindle more of the rich man's property and wealth and stuff, but in the end, the rich man is pleased with this dishonesty. And that's better than how the children of the light act, because, as Jesus said, dishonest wealth is the way to go. What? This is one of those gospel passages where so much ink has been spilled over the centuries about what Jesus actually means by this story. People have disagreed, if you can believe it, with each other over the point that Jesus is trying to make. And preachers have been avoiding this story for as long as there have been preachers. But obviously it's here for a reason. And as I mentioned earlier, this is just one of a few stories or parables that Jesus tells regarding the topic of money and wealth. So let's try and get some clarity and back up a little bit. In chapter 15, the chapter just before today's gospel, we get a couple stories. We first get the parables of the lost sheep and the lost coin, which we heard in worship last weekend. And as we heard, those parables showed us this incredibly generous and loving God who sets everything aside in order to search for the lost, to search for us. After those two parables, Jesus tells another parable, this one of the prodigal son. Right? We've heard of that one. There's the dad, the head of the household, who has two sons and has some wealth. The younger son comes to him. He asks for his share of his inheritance early, and the father complies. Then the son goes off and squanders all of that money. I think we've heard that term before recently. After that happens, the son gives up. He comes crawling back home, expecting no more than a job as a servant in that household. And yet, as we know the story goes, the father graciously welcomes the son home. Throws them a party, in fact. A completely unexpected reaction by the father. So after Jesus tells that parable of the prodigal son, he immediately begins telling the parable we heard this morning. The parable of the dishonest manager, where the head of a household, the rich man, gives some of his money to someone else in that household, in this case the manager, who then goes off and, squanders it all away. Now we're hearing some similarities between these two parables, aren't we? But let's clarify some of the details from today's parable. When the manager is confronted by the rich man about his misuse, his squandering of this wealth, it starts to sound as though the manager begins to try to make things right with his boss, with the rich man. But that's not what's happening, is it? When he's trying to come up with a plan, this manager says, I have decided what I'm going to do when I am dismissed as manager so that people will then welcome me into their homes. The plan he's concocted is not meant to redeem himself with the rich man or get back some of his wealth. The plan was self-serving so that other people would help him out when he's lost his job and is out on his own. So how does the manager do that? Well, he starts cutting the debts that are owed to the rich man. He says, how much do you owe my master? Well, cut that bill by a third, and you just pay him half of what you owe. So it's not 100% clear, I don't think. But I don't think those debts that the other people owed, these debts that the manager is cutting, I don't think those debts have anything to do with the money this manager squandered in the first place. They're completely separate. So really, in fact, this rich man is losing more money because of what the manager is doing in cutting these debts. And we're thinking, how's he getting away with this? But what does Jesus say about him? He says, the master commended the dishonest manager because he acted shrewdly. The rich man sees this manager as having acted wise or insightful or thoughtful. How can that be? What are we missing? Or maybe you all have figured it out and I'm just the one struggling up here. I don't know. Well, if we think of this parable in light of the parable just before it, the prodigal son, we are reminded about this generous and surprising reaction of the father, the one who welcomes home the one who was lost, the one who gives more to someone who squandered so much already. Maybe there's something with that. That no matter how many mistakes we made, no matter how lost we become, no matter how much we squander, the Master continues to entrust treasures with us. Because maybe the Master hopes we'll use them correctly eventually. Jesus said, for the children of this age are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than are the children of light. Children of light is this term that's sometimes used in the gospel to refer to those who follow Jesus, those who are in the light of Jesus. Meaning, people who are of this world, maybe by their actions with their own generation, can be examples for the ones who are following Jesus. How? Okay? Jesus said then, and I tell you, make friends for yourselves by means of dishonest wealth, so that when it is gone, they may welcome you into the eternal homes. Dishonest wealth? Wait, what? This is really where I get confused. Jesus, you want us to be dishonest? Well, I found a different translation of that line. From the NET version, it said, make friends for yourselves by how you use worldly wealth. By how you use worldly wealth. A more literal translation of dishonest wealth is really unrighteous mammon, which is really, all of this is to say that the point is not that money is inherently evil, but that money is often misused so that it becomes a means of evil. make friends for yourselves by how you use your worldly wealth, so that when it runs out, you will be welcomed into the eternal homes. So again, let's think about this. What did the dishonest manager do that made him so shrewd in his master's eyes? What did he do? He reduced the debts that people owed his master. And again, that was not a direct benefit at all to the rich man, but it was a big benefit to the people who owed the debt. So thinking of that, maybe we hear that God is pleased. Maybe God thinks that we are shrewd or insightful or wise when we try to help others, when we try to reduce their debts, when we try and make life easier for them, when we use gifts given to us by God for the sake of someone else. Could that be a viable interpretation? So then Jesus says, whoever is faithful in a very little is faithful also in much. And whoever is dishonest in a very little is dishonest also in much. So even little acts of kindness, even little acts of generosity are, in God's eyes, acts of great service. And in that same way, even little acts of meanness or selfishness or dishonesty are, in God's eyes, acts of great disappointment. There's a part of these parables that shows us a right and a wrong way of dealing with money and wealth. But I think the bigger point of these parables shows us how God deals with us. God entrusts us with treasure. Sometimes we squander those treasures through our greed and our mistakes and our dishonesty. But still, as we've been hearing over and over again, God seeks us out. God forgives us. And God gives us opportunities time and time again to have a change of heart and be generous to others beyond all measure. And I wonder if that's the kind of experience our senior members have had in their lives. And I wonder if we all can use our worldly wealth and our treasures from God and all the gifts that God has given us to lift up each other and to show God just how shrewd we can be for the sake of God's kingdom here. Amen.